welcome to episode 152 of Cinematary. I'm your host, Zach Dennis, and I am here with
Lydia Creech,
Ashley Baker,
and John McCamus.
And in today's episode, we will be talking about movies we saw this week in part 1. And in part 2, we will be joined by special guest Jeffrey Couchman to talk about 1955's The Night of the Hunter. As part of our Young Critics Watch Old Movies series, Jeff wrote the book The Night of the Hunter, a biography of a film, and he kind of just we have a great chat, very much like last week, where we dig into that film a lot, which as a big fan of that, I think it's a great conversation, so definitely check that out later in the episode. But let's go ahead and get started with some movies that we saw this week. John, I know you and Ashley watched something that has a little bit of a connection to Night of the Hunter, so a little cross promotion.
That's true. Ashley, you wanna?
We watched Do the Right Thing. It's a Spike Lee masterpiece. Mm-hmm. I think we can call it. It's just one of my favorite films of all time, I think, and I never really get tired of watching this movie. It's about just this neighborhood in Brooklyn on one of a few really hot days of the year, and a lot of pizza delivery and racial tension and other stuff going down, and there's a lot of political and social issues in this film that are sadly still relevant, even though this film came out, I believe, in 89.
Yeah.
But it does have relevance to Night of the Hunter because Spike Lee loves Night of the Hunter, and he makes a direct reference to the right hand, left hand kind of thing with Preacher, with one of the main characters, Radio Raheem, who instead of having love-hate tattoos on his fingers has love-hate brass knuckles, and kind of does his own version of the right hand, left hand kind of, soliloquy. What would you call it? Soliloquy kind of story.
Yeah. And the cast is really, really
just
great.
Just fantastic.
Samuel L. Jackson, Martin Lawrence, Spike Lee. Man, it's still just a great masterpiece of American cinema, even today. And the political relevance. What's that, Zach?
Yeah. Well, you've said you've watched it a bunch of times. Did anything strike you this most recent time? It did something, I don't know, did something stand out differently than you had, noticed in previous viewings?
And I want to ask how you interpret the ending, because it's pretty not controversial, but
there's kind of
depending on where your stance is on what's Spike Lee's character's name? Mookie. Yeah, when he throws the trash can.
Yeah, well, there's kind of you've kind of got two endings. Well, you've kind of got a lot of endings towards the end of this film. You've got kind of the big climax of the film where Spike Lee's character Mookie. There's this big kind of brawl in Sal's famous pizzeria between Radio Raheem and Sal and Buggin' Out, and they're just going at it, and it goes out onto the street. The cops show up. A lot of things happen, and the police end up killing Radio Raheem. And so,
Spoiler.
Yeah, that's a big spoiler.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, sorry.
But yeah.
It came out in 1989.
Yeah. And so the neighborhood is just in an uproar against Sal's pizzeria, the Sal and his two sons who run this pizzeria, and everyone's kind of at this standstill of, well, do we just tackle these guys, or do we, talk it out? Do we let them go? Like, what's gonna happen? There's this huge moment of tension, and Mookie, who has kind of been this great but unwilling kind of moderator throughout the whole film, picks up a garbage can and throws it through the window, and that just unleashes all hell on Sal's Pizzeria. And then you get, after the credits roll, two very potent quotes, one from Martin Luther King condemning violence, and one from Malcolm X saying, I'm not condoning violence, but when it's necessary, basically.
Yeah, because throughout the film, really, everyone is just talking up until the point Radio Raheem is taken down by the police. It's just talk. They're like, let's talk it out. Let's try and be civil about it and talk. But then when the first act of violence is committed, then the rest of the film turns incredibly violent and brutal. And it really is a really intelligent approach to what is violence and actually how effective is it. And it there's really no other film like it. And it's still, again, Lydia, you asked the right question. Like, how do you interpret that ending? Because a lot of people have different interpretations.
And I kind of look at it as, yes, Mookie kind of did like commit a I don't know like the tense of the term, but like he committed an act of vandalism against the building, which turned into, they destroyed the building, but Sal and his sons were escorted to the side.
Yeah.
And they were allowed to just watch, which is not great for them. It's horrible. That's their livelihood, but
maybe he saved Sal's life.
He saved their lives. So, earlier in the film when Mayer takes Mookie to the side and says, hey, I got something to say to you. Always do the right thing. And Mookie's like, I got it, I'm gone. And that's like one of my favorite moments in the film. And obviously, like, it's the title of the film, Do the Right Thing. And so, like, it's a really kind of debatable thing that Mookie does, but I think, it's what he felt was the right thing at the time.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I'm not sure if Do the Right Thing is streaming anywhere, but I'm it's one of those that is probably easily accessible at a local library or something like that. And I encourage, if you haven't seen Do the Right Thing, you should definitely check it out.
It's always timely, I think.
It is. Lydia, you had a movie you wanted to talk about.
Yes, I finished this movie right before I hopped on to do the podcast, and I don't really know what possessed me to rewatch it. Andrew put it on his watch list, and that movie is 1995's Babe, written by George Miller and directed by Chris Noonan. George Miller of Mad Max fame. And this is just a kid's movie about a pig who thinks he's a sheepdog. It's because pigs are actually very intelligent. Actually, it makes sense because I just watched Okja, and that's about a pig that's super intelligent and doesn't want to die. And you love it because it's cute. And you love Babe because Babe is cute and super intelligent and tries really hard and is a good pig. He's a good pig. Yeah. I don't know. I just remember that as a kid, it would make me really sad, and I didn't like this movie, and I don't know why. I think maybe because this movie does not really play around with the fact that Babe might die, or like life on a farm for farm animals. A lot of them have, like, they're for eating, and they're not pets or cute. And that's kind of like a constant in the background for Babe, because it opens in like a pig factory. I mean, it's not as like prison campy as Okja. But that's still kind of a dark place to open your children's movie.
Well, I know that the Next Picture Show is doing Babe and Okja right now for their episode this week.
Timely.
I mean, what? I mean, outside of the opening of the pig factory, do you see Do you see any other comparisons between these two movies? I don't know. I remember watching Babe when I was younger also, but I don't remember anything specific about it. Does it kind of have that? Does it deal with anything, with capitalism in the same way that Okja does?
I don't know about capitalism, but there's this sheepdog character named Rex who's real upset that Babe's gonna come steal his job. But he starts out not as like a real antagonist, but he's very firm. Like, I'm a sheepdog. I herd sheeps. Roosters crow in the morning, and that's their job. And like, this is your set path in life, and you cannot change it because of who or what you were born as. And like, he changes his mind because Babe shows him that he can be the best sheep pig. He gets 100s at the sheep pig competition. Spoilers. But I don't know, it's like this real essentialism sort of thing that's obviously he's wrong, but it's kind of a really uncomfortable. I mean, I guess that's like an animal farm thing idea anyway. There can be like racism, I guess, or something like that. Prejudiced beliefs.
There could be racist. There could be some racist animals. We don't know.
I don't know. Speciesist. Speciesist. So, I mean, you're challenging those sort of ideas. I don't know. It's a lot easy. There's no violence or anything, and it's cute, and it's got animatronics by Jim Henson. He does some of that. So, yeah. So, I guess anytime the animals are talking, like their mouths are moving, that's animatronics and not terrible animation, because it's from 95. So, it looks pretty good, too. I guess, if you're not freaked out by animals talking, which can be a little bit weird. Just their mouths move. I don't know. So yeah, Babe. I'm going to watch Babe, Pig in the City after this because that one is directed by Mad Max George Miller. I don't know what I'm in for.
I'm sure you'll enjoy the where Babe joins like a biker gang type thing.
Isn't that one like pretty anti-capitalist? Is that what the reappraisal?
I'm sure it is. George Miller kind of has a bent with that, so I'm sure it will be a lot. I'll be curious. Maybe next episode we'll have to hear how Babe Pig in the City is compared to
Babe
to Okja.
I'll report back.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you. Is Babe streaming anywhere, or did you just rent it?
I got it from the local library. I don't know. I think you can probably rent it on iTunes or something. Oh, it says
I want to say it was on Amazon Prime at some point.
Letterboxd is saying it's on Netflix. So,
oh, okay. There you go.
There you go. Yes, it is. You can watch it on Netflix tonight.
Check out Babe on Netflix. You can watch Babe while Lydia's watching Babe Pig in the City. Cool. So we have a little bit of time left. I was going to talk about a new release real quickly. That's Spider-Man Homecoming, the latest Marvel Cinematic Universe movie and the third reboot of Spider-Man since 2000. This one, it was written by Jonathan Goldstein and John Francis Daley, and it's directed by John Watts, who came on the scene a couple years ago with the indie film Cop Car. And this iteration of Spider-Man is played by Tom Holland, who is pretty much the most giddy, excited human being on the planet right now. Regardless, I feel like of how you feel about the movie or anything, I really enjoy his like the interviews that he's done, and he was talking recently where he doesn't know anything about the next Avengers movie that he's in because he keeps like spoiling secrets for Marvel, and they're mad at him, so they won't let him read anything about Avengers because they're afraid that he'll spoil everything. And I find that kind of charming. I appreciate that. Yeah, I really appreciate that they have this 20-year-old who's just like so pumped to be Spider-Man that they can't tell him anything because he's spoiling it all. But yeah, outside of Holland, this movie also has Michael Keaton, who plays the villain, Marissa Tomei as Aunt May, Jon Favreau and Robert Downey Jr. reprise their roles. Robert Downey Jr. of course is Iron Man. It also has Zendaya, Donald Glover, Laura Harrier, Tony Revolori of Grand Budapest Hotel fame. Hannibal Buress shows up briefly for some reason. Very eclectic cast. I really enjoyed the high school high school kids, all the selections they had for that casting. But this one picks up Spider-Man or Peter Parker when he is in high school as a sophomore. It literally picks up right after the events of Captain America: Civil War, where he shows up for the big kind of halfway battle and where all these superheroes fight each other. Spider-Man's among them, and it kind of picks up there where he is where he's videotaping his excitement about being invited to this whole thing. And so really where the movie's plot picks up is him kind of a little bit, waiting for the next step. He's got his taste of the big leagues and superheroing, and he kind of wants to to continue that, and instead he's stuck doing being the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man and helping old ladies across the street and stopping people from robbing, stealing cars. And there's a kind of a entertaining montage where he's doing these little errands, and at one point this guy looks like he's breaking into a car, and Spider-Man stops him, and he's like, "What are you doing, man? This is my car." And he's like, "I'm so sorry." And then all the neighbors stick their heads out and start yelling at Spider-Man. He's like, "I'm so sorry, guys." And it's a whole thing. It's a little bit, but he's also dealing with the travails of high school. It kind of weaves in this much smaller story about Peter Parker and trying to survive high school and talk to girls and be into decathlon and go to parties and stuff like that, while a giant mechanical bird thing played by Michael Keaton attacks people. Like everybody's high school, right? Did you guys have that? Okay. Anyway, I'm not getting much help from the audience.
My high school sucks.
I haven't seen this movie.
So I'll admit, going in, I'm pretty biased with Spider-Man. I love Spider-Man. He's easily my favorite superhero. If you do your research and find pictures of young Zach, you'll find him in Spider-Man pajamas and in Spider-Man costumes. I think I wore a Spider-Man costume for 6-7 straight years, where that was just what I was every Halloween. So I love Spider-Man. I could sing the 1960s theme song if we really wanted.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Keep threatening to sing on the podcast.
Maybe at the end.
Okay.
But anyways, so I think going in, I was a little biased. Of course, I was going to find some enjoyment out of this, but I wasn't a big fan of the last two Spider-Man movies starring Andrew Garfield, that were directed by Mark Webb. Those were just kind of not great movies. I there's nothing really else you could say. They're just bad movies. But I love the Tobey Maguire. The three Tobey Maguire movies are good. Spider-Man 2 is probably one of the greatest superhero movies that we've ever had. It's a fantastic movie. But this one was very interesting. I think that it has it's a very entertaining movie. It's pretty light for the most part. It's very funny. I think it's a really enjoyable experience. It kind of has that good-natured friendliness that we saw a little earlier this year with Wonder Woman, where it's a much more positive superhero movie experience rather than something dour and dark like the recent Superman and Batman movies. And that's kind of what you want from a Spider-Man movie. I think that this is a character that you want it to be light and goofy. That's just kind of his personality. And Tom Holland is really just perfectly suited for this role. He's very charming. He's very charismatic. He brings some of that awe and wonder that he has outside of Spider-Man to this Spider-Man role, where he's doing stuff and he's getting excited or just shocked by what's happening around him. He's constantly in awe of really just the experience of being Spider-Man, and there's something a little charming to that. But one of the things that I kind of took away from this one that's different than any Marvel movie is that it really had a very interesting villain with Michael Keaton's character. A lot of the Marvel movies recently have just kind of had these figures that just appear and are there, and they kind of have villain on a T-shirt that they wear the entire time, and that's about it. There's nothing really that engaging or interesting about them. But this one, they kind of set him up. They pick up the movie. When the movie starts, he is helping. He's working with a crew and is helping to clean up the mess that was left after the Avengers battle in the movie The Avengers, where they had all of these aliens that have attacked New New York City, and he's very excited. He's got this big new gig, and he's going to make a lot of money. It's going to help his family. But then this kind of shadowy government organization comes in and says, "Hey, no more private contractors on this. We're going to be taking this over." And of course, he takes that. He doesn't really appreciate that intervention, and so he ends up taking some of the technology that they had recovered already and creating this vulture persona where he goes out and steals this equipment that this government organization is carrying and takes it back to his people, and they create these specialized weapons that they sell off for a lot of money to different people. And I think that what separates this villain from what we've seen in recent Marvel or just really comic book movies in general is that I think that there's a lot of weight to his character. You understand his motivations, and it's an interesting direction to go for a villain character in 2017 to have this character who I kind of always relate that battle sequence in the Avengers to kind of this reimagining of 9/11, where there's this New York City is under attack, but in the Avengers version we're able to overcome that and save the day, and it's all okay. And afterwards, I think it's interesting that we have this character who's directly influenced by that, where in the pre-9/11 world, he had a steady job. He didn't have to worry about anything. He was able to provide for his family. But now in this quote post 9/11, post of New York City battle world, he is stuck kind of having to reinvent himself. I think that's a kind of politically charged, no, not charged, but kind of a semi-political statement for this character to have in 2017 with kind of the political climate that we have, where a lot of the people who voted for the current president, I think that there's this sector of them that were just frustrated with losing with just kind of this technological revolution and losing out on their jobs and what they knew as a career up to this point, and now it's not a thing anymore. And I think that Michael Keaton's character really just embodies that, and instead kind of becomes this, instead of just waiting for somebody to give him back what his livelihood was before, he instead again reinvents himself. And of course it's crazed, pontificated because it's a superhero movie and he becomes a supervillain. But I really liked that commentary that they kind of had in, because even though he was doing all this stuff and he was the adversary to the Spider-Man character, I felt like his villain was so successful because I could kind of empathize and understand why he would be doing this. It wasn't just this shadowy figure that comes and has powers and wants to beat up the superhero. There was a clear narrative to what he was looking to accomplish. There's a clear line for what he was trying to accomplish. I thought that was interesting, especially in a Marvel movie that they have, this character that kind of has these different layers to him. But overall, I think Spider-Man: Homecoming it's fun. It's a solid movie. I think if you're looking for a blockbuster to entertain you, it'll do the job. And I think that. I'll also mention that I think that it also has one of the best scores for Marvel movies. I've ripped on those for many years now, but Michael Giacchino's score for this was superb. It had a personality. It had an inflection. It had the 1960s Spider-Man theme infused into the theme song, which is always a winner. So, if that's something that interests you, I would check out Spider-Man: Homecoming. I apologize for divulging into a long string of. It became very political for some reason.
And that's what we do.
Yeah, I guess so. All right. Well, I guess that'll wrap up this part of the podcast. We're going to take a short break. We'll be back talking to Jeffrey Couchman about Night of the Hunter after this.
Hello, Cinematary listeners. This is Andrew Swafford with an important message during this break in the show. Cinematary would like you to know that we do not want your money, and we don't want to place ads in the show at this time. That's not why we do this. We do it because we enjoy each other's company and because we want to bring you our pure, unadulterated opinions on the world of cinema. However, there are a few things you can do to help out the show that we would greatly appreciate. Firstly, leave us a review on iTunes, preferably a positive one, because the algorithm gods tell us that reviews increase our podcast exposure. Secondly, send us a tweet at Cinematary, or better yet, send an email to cinematary@yahoo.com so that we can hear from you guys for a change. Maybe you think I'm an idiot for not liking Singing in the Rain, or maybe you have a suggestion of a movie that you really want to hear our opinion on. Regardless, let us know your thoughts, and we'll read them out and respond to them on future episodes of Cinematary. Finally, please share the show with friends and members of your family who you think would enjoy listening to and participating in our film discussions we bring to you guys every week. So to recap, review, send us your thoughts through Twitter and email, and share with your friends and family. We would truly appreciate it. Thanks for listening. Now let's get back to the show.
Leaning, leaning, safe and secure from all alarms. Leaning, leaning, leaning on the everlasting arms. What a fellowship, what a joy divine, leaning on the everlasting arms. What a blessedness, what a peace is mine, leaning on the everlasting arms.
And we are back with part 2 of episode 152 of Cinematary. In this part, we will be continuing our Young Critics Watch Old Movies series with 1955's The Night of the Hunter. Joining us today is a very special guest, Mr. Jeffrey Couchman, who wrote the book The Night of the Hunter, a biography of a film. And he also worked with our guest from last week, Charles Malin, on the collection of James Agee works. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us for this.
Well, thank you for inviting me. This is really nice of you. It's great to be here with all of you. I can't wait. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess, usually on these parts of the episode, I do a quick introduction of the movie and set the scene before we start talking. But I figured since you are here and you wrote the biography of a film, you may be better suited for that role.
All right. Let me set it up a little bit with a few thoughts, and then we can get into questions and conversation. Sure. The Night of the Hunter, as you said, was released in 1955. But the story is set in West Virginia during the 1930s. It stars Robert Mitchum as a psychopathic, self-proclaimed preacher who murders a widow and chases her children down the Ohio River to get the $10,000 he knows they have on him. By the way, what I just said is not a spoiler. We learn the minute we meet Mitchum that he murders widows for their savings, and we soon see that Shelley Winters, as Willa Harper, is widowed, and when Preacher shows up in town and woos her, we know what's going to happen. There's a sense of tragic doom that hangs over Willa is, in fact, essential to the film. It's a very important part of it. There's no suspense there. What happens to Willa is a foregone conclusion. The suspense and the fear come from what will happen to the children as they go down the river and Preacher's after them. Eventually, the story pits the wicked preacher against a strong but saintly farm woman named Rachel Cooper, who's played by the strong but saintly Lillian Gish. The film is directed by Charles Laughton, who was an internationally acclaimed actor, famous as Captain Bligh in Mutiny on the Bounty or Quasimodo in The Hunchback of Notre Dame. He had directed stage plays, including just before Night of the Hunter, The Caine Mutiny Court Martial, Herman Wouk's adaptation of his novel. And he did do a few scenes in a 1949 film called The Man on the Eiffel Tower. Things didn't work out so well with the original director, Irving Allen, so Laughton directed a few of those scenes. But Hunter was his first complete film. And sadly, it was his last. The film did not do well at the box office, so this was the beginning and the end of Charles Laughton's film directing career. The screenplay was written by James Agee, though Laughton eventually had a big hand in it. I'm sure we'll talk about that. Agee had been a noted film critic for Time Magazine and The Nation, and he'd written several scripts by this time, including collaborating with John Huston on The African Queen, a wonderful movie with Bogart and Hepburn. The script was based on a book by a first-time West Virginia novelist named Davis Grubb. It had been published in 1953 and was instantly a bestseller. Grubb actually drew on a true story of a serial killer named Harry Powers, who was hanged for the murder of 2 children and 2 widows who'd placed ads in Lonely Hearts columns. By the way, Jane Ann Phillips just published a book called Quiet Dell, which is also about Harry Powers, the whole saga here. Grubb named his character Harry Powell. I love that change, Powell. Anyhow, before Grubb's book was even published, the producer Paul Gregory saw the work in galleys. Grubb's agent had shown it to him, and Gregory bought the rights so that Lawton could direct the film. Gregory and Lawton had already teamed up for very successful stage shows, which I hope we can get back to in our conversation, because they really do have a bearing on The Night of the Hunter. But for now, I can just say that Gregory felt Lawton should turn to film directing. Lawton agreed, and they dived into Night of the Hunter. So that's probably enough summary and background, and we can dig into some details now, I guess.
Yeah, no, I agree. So I guess before we get into the film, let's talk a little bit about Lawton. Like you mentioned, he was a very accomplished actor. People pretty much knew him from that before he started directing and did Night of the Hunter. And it seemed like, judging from the book, that you said that he kind of had a hands-on approach with the crew. It seemed like he was, working a lot with everybody involved, because this was his first time directing a film, and he seemed to want to take everything in. And one of the people he was working a lot with was the book's author, Davis Grubb, on creating kind of the look of the film. So what do you kind of make of Lawton and his process with creating this movie?
Yeah, that's a good question. Lawton was, first of all, very much in control. I interviewed several people involved in the production, and they talked about how much control he had, and he knew what he wanted, but he was also very open to listening to everybody. He was really very democratic. It's a fascinating combination of the authoritarian who wants something and wants it done his way, but also will listen and see what you have to say, and all right, we can adjust that, we can fool with that. Very democratic process with all the different people. And Hilliard Brown, the art director, and Stanley Cortez, the cinematographer, have both said that they felt on Night of the Hunter they were able to be more creative than they'd ever been in their careers. Lawton just was a wonderful guy to work with, and he and Cortez in particular talked about how simpatico they were. But the first person Lawton was simpatico with was Davis Grubb. Lawton loved writers who put stuff in. He said, I like the putter-inners. He was a big fan of Thomas Wolfe, and he liked big novels and lyrical writing. And Davis Grubb is a putter-inner. He's very lyrical. He loves words. Night of the Hunter is beautifully written. It's a thriller, but it's very lyrical. And Lawton immediately responded to this writing, and he called up Grubb, who was working as a copywriter in Philadelphia. And the first thing he said was, my God, man, who are your masters? So he went up to Philly to meet with Grubb in person, and they spent several days just talking about the book and getting to know one another and really feeling one another out. They had a very good, close relationship. Grubb eventually wrote a long 6-page single-spaced letter detailing a lot of thoughts about the film, how things should look, how things should be played out, how the music should be. I mean, very, very, very involved. And especially he was involved in the look of the film, because Grubb, who had skills as an artist, he'd gone to the Carnegie Institute of Technology for a year, so he could write. He drew pictures for Lawton. So in the Margaret Herrick Library in Beverly Hills, you can go there and see about 120 drawings that Davis Grubb did for the picture. There's a layout of the town, Creasap's Landing. There's pictures of what the kitchen should be like. There's pictures of a preacher outside by the gas lamp. He has individual pictures of the characters. Stunning stuff. And many of the pictures are pretty much storyboards for the film. Hilliard Brown's town that he helped to design and out at the Rowland V. Lee Ranch in San Fernando Valley, his town looks very much like the town that Davis Grubb sketched, and the kitchen looks a lot like what Grubb sketched. So he was deeply involved in the look and the feel of the film. Something that's noticeable about the film, which I'm sure we'll get into, is the dichotomy of the thing. It's very pastoral, very realistic in some places, but extremely unrealistic, stylized and expressionistic in other places. And nobody has ever figured out where these ideas came from. We know that Lawton was looking at D.W. Griffith films with James Agee in New York. He was very interested in capturing the clear pastoral quality of D.W. Griffith. But what led him to these strange expressionistic techniques, like looking at the burlesque dancer through a matted keyhole? The murder scene occurs. There's an A-frame that makes the bedroom look like a church. I mean, where these expressionistic ideas came from are not quite clear, but I have a theory that it came from Davis Grubb's drawings. In my book, I reproduce a couple of the drawings that are a little more expressionistic. He has one of a stripper in a burlesque club that looks very much like the German expressionist artist George Gross. And he has a picture of Harry Powell imagining the women he's killed, and one woman has just one eye and these disembodied faces over his head. It's very disturbing. So it's quite possible, in my mind, that Lawton looked at these non-realistic pictures and it somehow triggered something in him. Of course, if he was already thinking of silent films, he would have latched on to German expressionist silent films and maybe felt that sort of German expressionist technique was just right for this particular subject matter. But I have a feeling, because he was so intent on the drawings and he aped the drawings so well in his film, that the expressionist ideas that Grove was playing with somehow triggered non-realistic ideas in Lawton's presentation.
Yeah, because I agree. The aesthetic of the film is just so it has a lot of stuff that you can recognize and seems very realistic, but then you have those kind of dreamlike, surreal qualities to it. Namely when they're on the river, and just kind of that whole sequence from them getting away from Preacher to them meeting up with Miss Cooper. I guess go more into detail with kind of Griffith and the German expressionist films, because it seemed like he drew a lot from that and just how he framed and created the ambiance of the whole thing.
Yes, well, he was very interested in going back to the silent era. He felt people were much more involved with films when they were silent. He said they leaned forward and were involved. Now they sit back and eat popcorn. He just felt he wanted to capture the power and the essence of visual storytelling. So he was very intent on Griffith. Griffith really hangs over the whole movie. I mean, Griffith has a pastoral quality. It's very realistic, but it's also infused with a kind of poetry, you might say. There's this lyrical quality to his cinematography, and Lawton wanted his second unit director, Terry Sanders, to go out to West Virginia. Most of the stuff was shot in a studio, but he had Terry Sanders go out to West Virginia, and he wrote specifically in his notes to Terry Sanders, capture clarity. I want to see everything. I want it nice and light and bright. He really wanted that Griffith clear quality in the West Virginia landscape, which Terry Sanders did beautifully. All those early shots, the helicopter shots, seeing the river and the towns, that's all Terry Sanders stuff out there on location. And when Preacher is going down the road in his Model T car, the rear projection, all those scenes in the background, those clear, beautiful shots of cemeteries and houses and roads, that's all Terry Sanders' location work in West Virginia. And the picnic scene, when they all go out and they're singing, bringing in the sheaves, and he's sort of wooing Willa there in the beautiful picnic setting, that's very much in the vein of the pastoral D.W. Griffith poetically infused imagery. So he's quite intent on D.W. Griffith. He also did some technical things, though. He noticed that Griffith constantly returned to the master shot, would come back to the master shot, and Lawton loved to do that within this film. There's one great example when Willa goes to the house and hears that Preacher is actually a villainous. He says to a little Pearl, "Tell me where the money is or I'll tear your arm off, you little wretch." She hears this, and in the script, both the first draft that A.G. wrote and the shooting script, it has a close-up of Willa hearing this and discovering that Preacher is villainous. Lawton doesn't do that for the film. He cuts to the same long shot that he opened the sequence with. So we see Willa all alone outside this house looking very frail and vulnerable. And so he returns to the master shot for incredibly emotional effect. It's just great. So that specific detail of Griffith he was interested in. He was also interested in capturing silent film technique by using as few shots as possible. It's really when Preacher is going after the kids and John is trying to get Pearl into the boat. In the script, there's a lot of inserts. He wants to see the hands on the ropes and the hands pulling at the oars. And Lawton shot those scenes. He shot a lot of those inserts, those close-ups. They're in the outtakes. You can see them, which are on the Criterion DVD. But he didn't use them. He would keep all the action in medium shot, like a silent film. We see John struggling to get Pearl into the boat, and they would cut to medium shots of Preacher coming at him. So he would cut from medium shot to medium shot, back and forth, very much in a silent vein, using as few shots as possible to tell the story. I guess my favorite shot in that vein is when Ben Harper is taken away, arrested for the murder of a bank guard, and Willa runs into the shop. And there's little Pearl and John. She scoops up Pearl. John looks up at her, and he's already been told by his father, never tell where the money is, never tell. So John leaves the women and walks away from them. All one shot. Willa comes into the shot, picks up the kid. John looks and walks away. We get all this emotional tension between mother and son, with the mother's anguish of what's happening with Ben being taken away, but it's all just in one single shot. So silent film technique was very much on his mind. But the expressionistic stuff is very much in the vein of German expressionist films. I've mentioned that phrase. The seminal film is Cabinet of Dr. Caligari from 1920, right? Where you've seen that, right? Probably. Yeah, with the artificial sets and very, very obviously artificial sets and painted backdrops. And when they're going down the river in Night of the Hunter, and we see a barn on the land, it's really just a painted backdrop. It looks like there's no dimension to it at all. Very much in the vein of Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. And Hilliard Brown says it was quite intentional. We intended to make that a non-realistic barn. The whole river sequence. Lawton said he wanted it to be like a dream for the kids. So as you said, that's an incredibly surrealistic section where we just sort of go down the rabbit hole, into this incredible imagery of the night sky and the giant animals in the foreground and the skiff drifting along in the background. And he, German Expressionism uses angular shadows to, let's say, create a nightclub turn into a very threatening space, like in Dr. Mabuse the Gambler. And the angular shadows and the dark and the lights, chiaroscuro effects that we see in Night of the Hunter go back to German Expressionism. So this clash of styles, the realism of Griffith, the angular, dark, brooding shadows of German Expressionism, make for a very unusual film, really, really distinctive in its style, which bombed at the time, but is quite fascinating to people now, I think.
Is the style... Oh, sorry. I was just wondering if the style... later questions talk about how the film flopped and just didn't catch on with the audience. Do you think maybe this blend of like silent cinema techniques and German expression is just too weird for audiences at the time? Because I'm looking at other 1955 films that are really popular, stuff like The 7-Year Itch and Rebel Without a Cause. So also like color films were getting bigger.
Yes, absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. That's a good way to put it. It was just too weird for audiences at the time, and probably seemed a little old. We're sort of fascinated now by this use of cinema, silent cinema. At the time, it maybe just seemed like, God, we're going back to that. Didn't we do that already? That's old, It probably looked old. And yes, you're right. Big color spectacles were around. And as far as religion is concerned, this is called big Ben-Hur, 10 Commandments, Salome. These were huge films that put religion on screen as spectacle and very reverential. This is a black and white, very dark film that shows the dark side of religion. I mean, you get the saintly character. Lillian Gish plays the good, saintly Christian, but my God, Preacher, of course, is this man who's driven by God to kill people. And then Icy Spoon and all the wonderful townspeople who are very reverential and singing, bringing in the sheaves, have this veneer of Christianity. When he betrays them, my God, she's leading a lynch mob after this guy. He Christ through the mud, let's get him. It's like tear off the lid of this Christianity and you see horror. They're as bad as Preacher. So it's a film that really sort of looks at the darker underpinnings of religion, and that probably was not too appealing to people in 1955.
That's true. I want to talk a little bit about the script because, we talked a lot about James Agee last week, and he wrote the first draft of this. And in the book, you mentioned that there was like this rumor that it was like 400 pages long and it was just unusable and it was just crazy. And Lawton, it seemed like ended up rewriting, pretty much all of it to make the shooting script. So, what can you tell us about Agee's original script, and what did he take from the novel, and what was he kind of going for with that first draft?
Sure, absolutely. That what you said, though, I should point out is sort of the myth that Lawton completely rewrote it. It's that's still a little controversial. I don't think it's quite as extreme as people have made it out to be. The myth about the script is that Agee came on and veered away from the novel, put in newsreel footage, but all this stuff that he was interested in the Depression, and wrote a script that was, some people said 350, others said 400. Mitchum said as big as a telephone book, this monstrous thing that was completely unusable. And then the legend is that it got thrown out. And in some reports, Agee was kicked off the project and sent back home, sent back to New York. And Lawton sat down and rewrote the thing from scratch and just completely redid the script. That's not true. Agee stayed on for the revision period. There are documents that show him getting paid for the revision period for 5 weeks. There are contracts. He was paid $1,000 a week for revisions, and he was there all 5 weeks during the revision period. The contract says that Lawton and Paul Gregory, the producer, could have paid him off for $2,500 and just got someone else for less or done it on their own, but they kept him on. So they paid him $1,000 a week, an additional $5,000. And there's a memo, one memo only, unfortunately, but there's a memo from Charles Lawton to Agee suggesting a difference in shots when Rachel Cooper is reading the Pharaoh story in the Bible. He says, why don't we do these shots? because A.G. had sort of extended it and had a fairly long sequence. And the shooting script is exactly like the layout of shots that Lawton has laid out in that memo. So he had a big hand. Clearly, there were other memos like that. I'm sure they just got lost. And but he was working with A.G., giving him directions, but no doubt also suggesting to A.G. this should be shorter, that should be shorter. And it's a complete myth to think that A.G. couldn't edit a script. He had already written before Night of the Hunter in 1951. He wrote 5 short films for television. For the omnibus television show, he wrote 5 episodes in the life of Abraham Lincoln. And he wrote some of those scripts fairly long. He was supposed to be half-hour episodes, and he wrote a very long one for the first draft, for instance. But then within a few weeks, he cut it down to a very tight, manageable size, so he could edit very quickly and condense very, very well. He'd also written a wonderful short film called The Bride Comes to Yellow Sky, and that was filmed in a production called Face to Face. And that's a terrific economical, lean script. So he was capable of cutting and condensing. So it wasn't as if Lawton was completely stranded without a writer. Although what A.G. did, he didn't stray from the novel. That's another myth, because the script was actually discovered in 2003. Paul Sprecher, the trustee of the James A.G. Trust, discovered the script in a letterbox, in another box of books that had come from A.G.'s house on King Street in New York, and he discovered the first draft of Night of the Hunter. It has been published, as a matter of fact. It came out in February. The brand new book. It's called The African Queen and the Night of the Hunter, First and Final Screenplays. I edited it, and it's part of the Works of James A.G. series by the University of Tennessee Press. This is volume 4. Charles Malin's volume of criticism is soon to come out as well. But this volume 4 contains, for the very first time, the published script of The Night of the Hunter first draft. And it also has the shooting script. So you can compare the two. You can see them side by side. It has extensive annotations. The shooting script was published before. It was in A.G. on film in 1960 with several other scripts and republished in the Library of America. But this volume that has now come out has some very interesting things in it in the shooting script that were never printed before. In the moment when Preacher is calling to the children after Willa is murdered, he says, "Children," if you remember that in the film. They actually have musical notes so that we can see the octave jump. Children. They write a staff out and put notes on the page. And later he does the same thing when he's blocked behind the door. Children. So the musical notes are on the page, and they're published there for the first time. And there's some other niceties within the script that are published for the first time. So anyone interested in Night of the Hunter will want to see that first draft that A.G. wrote. By the way, I should mention that the first person to ever tell me about the first draft was Preston Neal Jones, who has written a wonderful book called Heaven and Hell to Play With, the filming of The Night of the Hunter. It's an oral history of the film. Preston interviewed practically everybody involved in the film, and then he stitched the interviews together with his own commentary. So it's a wonderful book. I would say our 2 books, The Biography of Film and Heaven and Hell to Play With, are really complementary. If you have one, you should probably have the other. Anyhow, what the script shows, anyone who reads it now in this University of Tennessee volume will see that A.G. stuck very closely to the novel. In fact, he was a little too faithful to the novel. There are long speeches by Ms. Cunningham, and A.G. includes all those speeches. There's a long monologue by Rachel Cooper, which works beautifully in the book, but A.G. just dumps the whole monologue into the end of the film. It goes on for pages, And then he has a long speech for the defense lawyer. He just overdid the thing. He loved the book so much. He really was wrapped up in it. He said Davis Grubb has provided a wonderful film book here, and he said he thought Davis Grubb should get credit first, and he does. On the screen, you can see book by Davis Grubb, screenplay by James A.G. That was A.G.'s idea, to put the novelist first. So he was too devoted to the book. And when Lawton saw this script at the end of June in 1954, and he had a start date of August 15 for production, he must have been appalled. He said, "How am I going to cut this thing down?" But Lawton was a brilliant editor. And here we can get into those stage plays I was talking about, because Lawton had he created a stage play of John Brown's Body, Stephen Vincent Benet's epic poem. He created a brilliant show for 3 actors and a big chorus that sang songs and created special effects. And the music in John Brown's Body, by the way, was by Walter Schumann. So they already worked together. But he created this brilliant condensation of John Brown's Body, wonderful editing. And Herman Wouk, with his big play, K Mutiny Court Martial, went on for 4 hours. Lawton came in to direct it, and over a weekend, according to Wouk, he cut out an hour and cut it down. Wouk said, "You're killing my play." And then he realized, "Oh, you're making my play great." And Wouk eventually when the play was published, he has a credit to Lawton saying, dedicated to you in admiration and gratitude. So Lawton was an absolutely brilliant editor. He could cut down a play. He could condense an epic poem. He was ready to work on James Agee's very long, very big script. And basically he did an editing job, I think. But it's they worked together. My feeling is that they really should get screen credit together. And that's what Agee felt. He wrote a letter at one point to I don't think any screenwriter in history has done this. He wrote to the producer saying, I think Lawton and I should share credit. He said, sometimes I think maybe Lawton should get solo credit, but I feel I was useful as a sounding board and a counter irritant, so okay, I'll share credit. But Lawton and Gregory said, no, I don't want to do that. Gregory wrote back and said, you made a wonderful contribution to the film and you should get solo credit. And Lawton didn't want to be seen as a credit hog or something. So Agee gets solo credit, but really Lawton was deeply involved in the editing, but he certainly did not just take over the whole thing. They were still deeply involved together. And what Agee had done was to dramatize a lot of important sequences in the film, and he created the structure. Midway through the novel is where we learn where the money is hidden. We have a flashback, and that's where we discover where the money has been hidden. Agee pulls it forward in chronological order, lets us see where the money is hidden. And he also does a similar thing with the discovery of Willa's corpse in the river. In the novel, Uncle Bertie he's drunk and he's telling a picture of his wife what he saw down in the river. Oh, Bess, if you'd seen this horrible thing. And he describes what he saw in flashback, essentially. Agee doesn't do that. He lets us discover the corpse at the bottom of the river so that we see Bertie himself discovering the corpse at the bottom of the river. So he rearranges the order of things in very important ways, and Lawton kept all of that restructuring and rearrangement in place. And there's a lot of wonderful little details that Agee put in. One of the great moments in the film, I'm sure you'll love the moment where Mitchum's in the burlesque house, and he puts his hand in his pocket and he pushes the knife up through his coat pocket. That's Agee's bit. Although in the original script, he wanted it to come up through his trouser pocket. So it was a real image, I'm sure thought, well, Marine officers are never going to go with that, the production code administration, so I'll have it come up through the coat. But that switchblade popping up was Lawton's idea. And those kids at the beginning of the film, all those disembodied faces of the kids, that's also Agee's idea, but he put it at the end of the script. He wanted to end with these images of kids' faces. Lawton took that and put it at the beginning. So there's a lot of stuff in the script that is still Agee, and basic structure it remains Agee.
I want to talk about Robert Mitchum in this lead role. What about him was Lawton taken by as this preacher character? I know in the book you mentioned that Laurence Olivier was kind of somebody thrown out there, but I think that you can't have this. It's after watching this so many times, you can't have this role without Robert Mitchum. He just seems so perfectly suited for that. So what did Lawton see? That is
so much the truth, isn't it? I think today part of the reason it holds up so well is we just love Mitchum's performance. It's really compelling. Even people at the time were admired it. But Mitchum, I think he's handsome, he's strong, and Lawton once said to Mitchum something like, people who sell God have to be sexy. So I think he saw the sexiness of Mitchum was very important to him. That's probably also why he wanted somebody attractive like Laurence Olivier. And Preston Neil Jones talks about Gary Cooper as being something that they all thought about. I guess Grubb mentioned he was excited at Gary Cooper doing it. And Paul Gregory told me that he was thinking maybe having Jack Lemmon play the part. But right after Night of the Hunter, Gregory cast Jack Lemmon as the villain John Wilkes Booth in a show for Omnibus again, I think, the day or some other show, the day Lincoln was shot. And so he had this idea that Lemmon, as this attractive guy, could play a villain very, very well. But all of these people, whether Cooper, Olivier, Lemmon, or Mitchum, are very attractive on the outside. So he wanted somebody smooth and handsome, but he also wanted somebody who could be tough and strong. And Mitchum just filled the bill all the way around. The interesting thing about Mitchum's performance, though, is that it's a little bit heightened. I mean, considering what he usually does, it's kind of, for Mitchum, it's really over the top. Mitchum is just incredibly low key acting. Oh, Agee has a great comment about Mitchum in Out of the Past from 1947. He reviewed Out of the Past, and he said this about Mitchum. He said, Bob Mitchum is so very sleepily self-confident with the women that when he slopes into clinches, you expect him to snore in their faces. A wonderful Agee writing. So it's typical of Mitchum to play things down. He's very low key, even when he's playing somebody vicious like Max Cady and Cape Fear. But here, he's really kind of over the top and theatrical and having the time of his life playing this part. My feeling is he may have been caught up in Lawton's performances. Lawton was a kind of over-the-top actor. He loved to not ham it up, but play things large, give them big And, Gregory once said everybody who worked with Lawton got sort of pulled into his orbit, became shaped by Charles Lawton. So the one time in his career Mitchum puts on an overly theatrical performance is when he was working with Charles Lawton. I don't think that's just a coincidence, I think Lawton wanted something a little bigger, and Mitchum was able to give it to him. So it's a wonderful, wonderful, controlled. I say over the top, but still very, very controlled performance. The thing is, the film is really all about duality, right? It's good and evil, it's shadow and light. And the fascinating thing that in the acting, you see this duality. Mitchum is a bit theatrical, over the top, because Harry Powell himself is theatrical. He loves playing the role of the leader and the master minister, that scene good and evil when he has his two hands on doing the arm wrestle in the Icy Spoon's place. You can see he's just loving putting a spell over these people and playing the part. And Mitchum is loving playing a man who's playing a part, So you can see Mitchum's over-the-top theatricality, kind of a code almost for Preacher's deceitfulness, Preacher's phoniness. Whereas Lillian Gish is playing in a very natural, straightforward way, pulling back and very low-key and understated. And her low-key acting is kind of a code for the honesty and the straightforwardness of Rachel Cooper. So even in the acting techniques, you get a clash here in the characters, and they say something about the two different people that are being played, Harry Powell and Rachel Cooper. And Mitchum just does a brilliant job of controlling that and showing phoniness of Preacher through his brilliant acting in this film. One of the best roles ever.
Yeah, one of the things I always think of with Mitchum in this role is, you hit it, like he has that over the topness, and he's really is doing that for most of the movie. And then when he runs into Miss Cooper and Lillian Gish's character, she immediately sees through it, and he tries to redo that scene with the love and hate on his fingers whenever he meets her. It's very similar to the scene with the Icy Spoon, but she completely just shuts him down. And I think that adds a little bit more to, you can feel the defeat of Preacher whenever he's up against Rachel Cooper, because she is shutting down all those theatrics. She doesn't allow him the time to pontificate and be this giant character that he's been for so long in the movie.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. She just cuts it off. And the way it's shot is completely different too. We see Preacher, he looms up in Icy Spoon's place. He stands up, and you see this man sort of overpowering this tiny little space, and you see their faces all just enwrapped. There's one shot where he has his hands grappling with each other, and John is in the background as if he's being overpowered by the hands, So you really get a sense in that first scene of Preacher in control and as a powerful figure. But in the scene with Rachel Cooper that you're talking about, we get a low-angle shot of Rachel Cooper. So she's the one who looms up. She's dominant. And then we look down on Preacher from a high-angle position. So he's in a lower position. So the camera lets us know that things have shifted. He's losing control of the story, in a sense. So he's losing control of power. And Rachel Cooper, the tough dame that she is, sees right through it and cuts it off and won't let him go through that scene. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Lillian Gish is just so, it's ironic that Lawton was watching so much of D.W. Griffith, because of course Lillian Gish is so synonymous with that director. She was, in The Birth of a Nation and Intolerance and many of his other films. And she has this such kindred, calm spirit to her. But then at the same time, she can get fired up immediately. When she first meets John and Pearl, she's like, get up, kids, get out, let's go. But at the same time, she's so sweet. Did Lawton see kind of this quality in Gish beforehand, or was this just a kind of character that she really embodied on her own and was just able to create the role herself?
Well, I think you're absolutely right that Lawton saw something in Gish right from the start, because all those qualities you just mentioned in Lillian Gish in Night of the Hunter, all of that was part of her whole screen persona all the time she was working with Griffith. And yes, she was so associated with Griffith at one time he thought maybe he would pull away from her because everybody thought he was nothing without Lillian Gish, But she could be incredibly tender and sweet and saintly in her films. I mean, in The Orphans of the Storm, she's this virginal woman, and she's a naive country girl in Way Down East. But she also had a real toughness to her. In The Orphans of the Storm, she's desperately trying to find her kidnapped sister, and then, you ever seen Victor Seastrom's film The Wind? I mean, she's fighting off an attacker who's coming to rape her. She shoots the guy, and there's sand and wind that she has to battle. I mean, she's a tough dame, Paul Gregory wrote her a letter, and he said, "Dear little iron butterfly." So Lillian Gish as an iron butterfly, she was always that way, tough, but saintly, serene, but determined, and Lawton certainly saw that in her in all the Griffith films he watched. And so pulling her into the film was a way, indeed, of bringing Griffith into his realm and using her as part of the Griffith connection. But it was that complex character, complex persona of Lillian Gish, that is what Lawton wanted. They talked about, Lawton actually mentioned himself, maybe Jane Darwell. You know, she was Ma Joad in The Grapes of Wrath. A wonderful character actor, very, very good in Bob Hope's The Lemon Drop Kid also. He talked about Jane Darwell, and he mentioned Ethel Barrymore at one point, but said she's maybe more Hudson River Valley than Ohio River Valley. So very different characters. They sort of were in passing and rejected fairly soon, and it was Lillian that he really settled on as the person to create the saintly and tough Rachel Cooper. So I think they worked together on that. And he also, talking about toning her down, though, he wanted to make sure she played in this. Her whole screen persona, though, in the silent film, she didn't overact. She wasn't like Theda Bara. She didn't overdo things. She always played low key. In one scene in the outtakes, when she discovers that she's got to get out of town because Icy Spoon is after them, she has this wild-eyed reaction. Where's Ruby? She went. We got to find Ruby. Her eyes go wild, and in the outtakes, she says, "Not so wild, Lillian, not so wild." And she does it instantly on the spot and plays it down. So he didn't want a heightened performance from her. He wanted it toned down. He wanted it calm and cool. And Lawton, Mitchum, he wanted a little bigger. So he's clearly working out this contrast, and he wanted Lillian Gish partly because she was so good at playing down, playing very straight and direct and without any phoniness and embellishments,
Yeah. What was the kind of decision-making process with having her appear at the very beginning of the film? Because it shows her reading from the Bible, and there's the kids' faces, and you don't really know who she is initially. Of course, you meet her later, but what was the decision between Lawton and A.G. and everybody to have her feature at the very beginning of the film?
That's a good question. It's not exactly clear how that happened. That's not in the first draft script. It's not in the shooting script. A.G., as I say, wanted this ending where children's faces appeared on the screen at the very finish of the film. That must have been in Lawton's mind. He began to think, well, maybe we should put kids' faces at the beginning of the film, and then maybe we should have her reading to them. At one point, Lawton was thinking of starting the film himself. In the outtakes, you can see him doing the introduction. He's the one saying, "We're going to have a little film here, and we're going to read you from the Bible," and he's doing his, he went on tour across the country doing a show called An Evening with Charles Lawton, where he would read from the Bible and read from Shakespeare. And he's very famous for doing this. And Paul Gregory had set him up on this tour. So at the beginning of the film, we're really seeing the Charles Lawton of his reading tours in the outtakes. Anyhow, we're seeing it when he's setting. But someplace along the line, he must have figured that's not going to work. That's not good. So where it happened, how it happened, I don't know. But he at some point said, let's have Lillian Gish start the film. She's the one who should start setting up the story with these quotations from the Bible. The quotations from the Bible were originally just superimposed in A.G.'s first draft. They were going to be images on the screen, words on the screen. That then in the shooting script became a voice, not Lillian Gish yet, just a voice speaking the lines from the Bible. Beware of wolf in sheep's clothing and all that stuff. A voice was going to speak that. At some point, he decided better than to have a disembodied voice, it would be better to have Lillian Gish, the actual character, speaking these lines to children. So it sort of sets her up as the saintly character who is in control of the story, really. But as you say, we don't know who she is. Although people at the time, especially in 1955, seeing Lillian Gish on the screen, they would have, people who've grown up with her in the silent films would have said, Lillian, she's gonna be a big part of this film. It would have been exciting for them, We don't necessarily, so we're cinephiles, don't have that same reaction. It's an unusual opening, but it sets up right away that bizarre quality to the film. As you said, the surreal, dreamlike quality of the film is set up immediately with that disembodied image of her and the kids all around her. So I think that's something Lawton was after. Let's immediately establish that the film is not going to always be realistic. Be prepared for something a little different here, folks. Get ready. I think it's a really nice strategy for a film that kind of goes off into strange areas from time to time,
One of the other players I wanted to talk about, behind the scenes was Walter Schumann, who did the score. You mentioned in the book that he and Lawton developed some of the score and some of the songs for the film before even filming, so that whenever they were on set, in production, they could kind of hear what the idea of this scene would be like. What was the thinking behind that? What what did they hope to accomplish by having the music beforehand?
Yeah, Lawton was very interested in music. As I say, he'd worked with Walter Schumann on his adaptation of John Brown's Body, and Schumann had written some beautiful melodies, things that will, if you hear them, will make you think of stuff from Night of the Hunter, in fact. And had a real sense of music, and he knew right away that the music was going to be very important in this film. He wanted a musical texture, so he did something very unusual. He brought the composer in even before the script was written, and they started thinking about how the score would work out, and together they developed. Schumann has written an article about this. He explains the whole thing and talks about how unusual it was, never happened like this before. He was able to work out a 6-part musical structure for the film, and so he could think of each part of the film as a musical exhibit, really. Whether Agee and Lawton talked about that or not, I'm not sure. But Agee's first draft very much has 6 parts. You can see 6 parts in it. I sort of break it down in my book. I show the 6 parts of the script that are there, and they are contained in the shooting script. So it's fascinating that there's the 6 sort of registers still. But Schumann, in fact, talked about certain sequences like the river sequence being edited with more footage than they needed so that it could be cut to his music. He was able to write, as he called it, a 12-minute tone poem for the river sequence, and then the film was cut to his music. That's unheard of. You know how it usually goes. A film is put together, and then they get a click track, or they dump in some music. The composer comes and they say, okay, I want a cue here, I want a cue there, and the composer has to fit his music to the frames of the film. Exactly the opposite for Night of the Hunter. They cut parts of the film to Walter Schumann's music. So Lawton just felt the music was going to help to give a certain texture and emotion to the film, which it really does. And Schumann created this contrast of good and evil within the music. They say the film was all about the clash of good and evil, right? So he has a theme for Preacher. There's these 8 blasting chords that are the evil Preacher theme. And then he has a lullaby, a couple of different lullabies that he uses, including a theme that Pearl sings on the river, the pretty fly. Once upon a time there was a pretty fly. Well, I won't try to sing it for you. I'll blow it. But the pretty theme sort of noodles around in the early parts of the film, and then she sings it, and then it becomes a motif all the way through the film. It has wonderfully grand symphonic treatment when they're escaping from Preacher on turbulent waters. So the film, the music in the film, with its repetitions and echoes and motifs, really becomes something that knits the film up. As I say, it's a film that goes from naturalism to expressionism. The surrealistic is realistic, very strange, but it's tied together in various ways. And one way it's held together is through the music, that shaping of musical motifs that play and weave in and out of one another that really helps to make the film organic and create a whole. So Schumann was instrumental in making this a very organic piece. Oh, he also was instrumental in the murder sequence. Actually, Stanley Cortez was putting the murder sequence together. He was designing it, just thinking about it, and he was off in his own world. And Lawton walked up to him and said, "What are you thinking about?" And Cortez, in that way he had with Lawton, said, "None of your goddamn business." And said, "All right, I'll tell you. I'm thinking of a waltz here as I'm setting up the murder shots. I'm thinking of Sibelius's Valse Triste." And Lawton said, "Oh my God, a waltz. That's great." Because Schumann had been talking about doing something very intense and dark for the murder sequence. He called Schumann to the set. So Schumann and Cortez and Lawton could talk about the shaping of the murder sequence, and Schumann ended up writing a waltz for the murder. Da, 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 and that becomes Willa's theme. We first see it and hear it in the honeymoon sequence when she's seeing the knife in the coat pocket and says, "Oh man," We hear the waltz theme then, but then the waltz comes in during the murder sequence, and underneath it, though, he combines it with Preacher's theme, this underlying deadly sound underneath. So he made a very complex score that he's got going there. But it was Cortez and Schumann with Lawton working together to create a musical idea for the murder sequence that then became a motif. Oh, and that waltz comes in later in the film when Ruby is outside the prison wanting to see Mitchum and said, he loved me, and then pulls her away and says, "We got to get home." While she's standing there for just, I think, 1 bar, maybe 4 bars, you hear a little bit of the waltz theme. So the Willa's waltz theme, which is really a theme of death, it's the theme of a girl gullible and comes under Preacher's spell. We hear that theme with Ruby for just a few bits and then beats and then we go on. So it's a brilliant echoing of the waltz theme. And then it comes in again when Lillian Gish is giving Ruby the brooch at the end. We now hear the waltz theme once again. And I suppose by that time the idea is, well, now it truly is a theme of innocence and girlhood, and Ruby is growing up and Rachel Cooper wants to help her. But my God, that theme is so associated with the death of Willow that it really troubles me when I hear that waltz theme underneath receiving your Christmas present. I'm thinking, oh my God, this girl's going to die sooner or later at the hands of somebody. So it's very complicated, I think. But the weaving of the themes really helps to keep the film unified.
Whose idea was it to give Preacher the kind of the tune that he whistles, the Leaning on the Everlasting Arms, which is like a real M sort of callback?
Yes, it is very much.
And then it gets played with at the very end with Lillian Gish, and they do a duet or counterpoint melody.
Right.
That in the book, or?
It is in the book. It's absolutely in the book. Leaning on the Everlasting Arms is in the book, and it was in a short story that Davis Grubb wrote about a killer. It's the story he decided to expand into a novel. He wrote a film, a story called Gentleman Friend, and it was about a guy who answers Lonely Hearts columns and kills a widow, and he sings a little tune. We never hear what the tune is in the short story, but he whistles a jaunting little tune, and so this guy becomes known as the Mockingbird Killer because people would hear this whistling tune before they discover the corpse, So the Mockingbird Killer, the idea of music with the killer, is in the short story Gentleman Friend, which then Grubb expanded into a novel. And you can see a handwritten note at the end on the back of one of his pages where he said, maybe make it's just the one boy in the short story. He said, maybe make it a boy and his sister, and maybe make this guy a preacher. Ponder this. He pondered it very well and created these two kids that are attacked by Preacher and turned the guy into this preacher character. And then he thought to give him him leaning on the everlasting arms. And that's all through the book, and then they use it brilliantly. Schumann and Lawton talked about, though, maybe using leaning on the everlasting arms as underscoring all through the film. Mm-hmm, and then Schumann decided, no, we can't do that. That will somehow give this man too much likability somehow, or it'll soften him somehow. If he's related to leaning on the everlasting arms, it's the wrong thing to do. So he created his own dark theme for Preacher, but then let Leaning on the Everlasting Arms just be the theme that he sings from time to time. And over the course of the film, it becomes the sound of terror. It's by the time he sings it out remember this wonderful scene where John is in the hayloft and he looks out. He thinks he's safe and free, and the moon and the birds are twittering, and he looks out and he hears leaning, and Preacher goes across the horizon. That sound right there is just the sound of horror and terror. And he says, "Don't never sleep." So it's a sound of cruelty. But when Lillian Gish sings it with him in that moment you mentioned, she sings Jesus. He's singing leaning, and she's singing leaning on Jesus. It was Paul Gregory who told Lawton, when I was a kid in Iowa in the Baptist church, I remember that the congregation would split into two parts, and one side would sing leaning, one song would sing leaning on Jesus. He said, when we have Gish do that. So that's how they did it. And in fact, I have a hymnal from the 1930s, and it's laid out exactly that way. The two parts of the congregation are supposed to sing separate parts there. But it's absolutely brilliant to hear Lillian Gish singing Jesus, a word that Mitchum, Preacher, never uses. That's great scenes of the film, isn't it? That duet that they have.
Yeah. Before we kind of wrap up, did anybody else have any other questions for Jeff?
Yeah, I had one. Jeff, what kind of influence do you think this kind of initial flop of a film, but now it's had kind of a resurgence? What kind of influence do you think it's had, just kind of maybe on American film history and maybe American culture altogether? I can only find like two things that come to mind. Obviously, Radio Raheem in Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing has the right hand, left hand. And then recently, just this year, a stop motion music video for this song called Moonwrapped is a shot for shot remake of the riverboat sequence that they animated. And I was wondering if you have any other influences or kind of
homages.
Yeah, well, the fingers love tattooed on one hand and hate tattooed on the other, which is in the novel. That's all part of the novel, too. I mean, the book is deeply faithful to the novel. Anything that's in the film is pretty much in the book. You can count on that. Those fingers have become sort of part of the culture. Rocky Horror Picture Show, Meatloaf comes through, and he has tattoos on his fingers, That's a tribute to people will say that was created in Rocky Horror. It's a tribute to Night of the Hunter. And in I mentioned also in my book The Simpsons, when what's his name is after SpongeBob. What? Not SpongeBob.
Sideshow Bob.
Sideshow Bob. SpongeBob. Wrong guy.
Same thing.
But although I could imagine them doing this in SpongeBob too, come to think of it. But Sideshow Bob is after Bart, and he's got just 3 fingers. So his tattoos say LUV and HAT with a long vowel sign over the A. Is that brilliant?
Okay.
So he's kind of love and hate. So the imagery of Preacher's fingers are sort of embedded into our culture. I think it's just part of the scene of a certain part of our life. The film, it's so unusual that I can't really think of it though as sort of influencing other films. It was its own thing at the time, and it remains its own thing now. I mean, certainly. I mentioned some songs that sort of echo the Preacher's fingers too. Bruce Springsteen has a song, and the Clash even have a song that sort of has talk about tattooed fingers. So I think in various ways, details from the film get brought in, but and that scene in Do the Right Thing is absolutely brilliant. A street lingo version of the love-hate theme. It's just brilliant. It's wonderful, But I don't think I wouldn't think of the film as having a huge influence on other filmmakers, really, because it's just nobody can do what it did. It's unique. There's truly is nothing like it in American cinema. And a lot of it has to do with Stanley Cortez, that brilliant cinematography. I mean, it's so wonderful. I think, when I showed it to I took my daughter and her friend to see the film on the big screen at the Film Forum here in Manhattan, and the kids just loved it. They loved the story, but both of them said, it's so beautiful. I mean, these kids wrapped up in black and white cinematography, It's wonderful. These 15-year-olds, or actually then they were 12, I think, were struck by the cinematography because it's so beautiful. It's so wonderful. So I suppose, people who want to shape and shade shadowy scenes within certain films might have Night of the Hunter in mind, but it hasn't had the kind of influences that, say, French films from the past or Italian films have had, because it's just so much the Night of the Hunter.
Yeah.
That's my feeling, anyhow.
Anything else? All right. Well, Lydia, did you have something?
I was just thinking about how it's funny. Last week we were talking about James, and he was the only defender of Charlie Chaplin's quote-unquote Bluebeard story, and then he writes a Bluebeard story a few years later.
Yes. That's great. That's great. Well, the ironies in Monsieur Verdoux and the ironies in Night of the Hunter are exactly what appealed deeply to Agee. The idea of showing the hypocrisy of religion.
Yeah.
That's something he was interested in, and So it was the dark
connections.
Edge. Yes, absolutely. Dark edge in Agee's film and the darkness of Night of the Hunter. He responded to that very well too. Yeah.
Well, Jeff, thank you so much for chatting with us. I thought this was great.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. This was really fun, and I'm glad to be here. And I love your website, so I look forward to listening to more of your podcasts. So,
thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
And I believe that will wrap up this episode of Cinematary. You can find us at Facebook at facebook.com/group/Cinematary, at Twitter at handle @Cinematary, and on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/Cinematary, where we post all the movies that we talked about in this episode. Next week, we'll be continuing our Young Critics series with 1953's Ugetsu. But I would recommend also checking out cinematary.com. We have some new writing. Andrew wrote about 2009's Orphan. John here wrote about 2006 Cars. And we just got Jessica Carr's review of Okja, which we talked about a little bit last week, but she has a much longer review on that film on the website now. But yeah, thank you guys for listening.